All right. Hello. Oh my goodness. I have been waiting to tell you guys this for a long time. Now that I've dropped a few hints. We've kind of discussed this a little bit. I reached out to some of you guys for some names and some thoughts on different names. But today I'm excited to kind of make an official announcement, some ministry updates. This show is going to be different than most of my shows and the ones that are coming up that I want to tell you about, in the sense that I'm not here to teach something or help address a very specific issue. This is more of a ministry update for those who are following the ministry. Now, there is going to be a Q&A at the end. If you have questions about the ministry, if you have questions, general apologetics, worldview, cultural type of questions that you want to kind of talk about and think through, you can either send those in the live chat as always. You can also call into the show. Not many people do that, but that is an option. You can call in and kind of have a conversation with me. And so I just want to kind of be here to help you think well and think critically about your cultural engagement and engaging the culture with a biblical worldview. And so my name is Pauly, and that is what I am here to do. If you are here for the first time, thanks for sticking through that intro. Again, if you want to kind of skip through the ministry updates, eventually there will be some timestamps below where you can do that, and then kind of jump to the Q&A if there are questions that come in. Now, with that said, big update. As I kind of mentioned, I want to help you think well. I'm excited to announce the foundation of Think Well. This is an organization that I just founded. I've been working on this for the last little while behind the scenes. And hi, Slam. Thanks for being here. And, let me give you a little bit of backstory, right? So for those of you kind of who have been following this channel for a while, you know my ministry, you know what's kind of been going on behind the scenes, so to speak. But this all started back in 2015. I was a missionary in the Dominican Republic, and I started kind of a coffee house ministry with the missionaries there in the country that functioned as a church. The coffee shop was used as a church on Sunday mornings, but then each night we had a different theme of the night. And so I would go multiple nights, but one night the theme was kind of apologetics theme. And so it was come, ask your questions, just have conversations. And that's kind of how this ministry started, is showing up at that coffee shop, having some people come in, talk about theology, talk about apologetics and religion, have those conversations. And then I started a blog, and I titled it coffeehousequestions.com. And that blog just kind of was my way of kind of, hey, this question was asked and here's kind of a response to it. And I started responding in that way. Now, eventually, obviously, in June of 2015, I moved back to the United States, where I started attending Talbot School of Theology, Biola University, to get my master's degree in apologetics. This is what I loved. This is what I was excited to do. And so that is kind of how the ministry began. 2016, I was challenged by J. Warner Wallace to not only have a blog, but to have a podcast. And he said, hey, you'll figure it out. You know how to do this, right? It's not that hard. And so after about a month or so of research, the podcast began. And I started podcasting and, again, sharing my thoughts and getting my thoughts out there. And as I've said many times on the podcast and now on YouTube, I love doing this because not only do I just love kind of getting the information out of me, right? I don't want to just sit there and learn and soak up all this information just so I can have it, but I want to use it. I want to teach it. I want to share it with other people. I want to make it useful and hopefully build you up with the same information that has encouraged me and built me up and built up my faith. And so that's what I did on the podcast. And for many years, it was just kind of me doing it for fun as a side hobby. And so all the equipment I bought and the programs I had and everything was just coming out of my own pocket, because I just loved doing it. And obviously in about 2020, or actually 2019, I started YouTubing more frequently and sharing short videos. 2020, I started doing more interviews right before COVID hit. And that is kind of where we are at now. So for the last few years, though, my church, as I've talked about a couple times before, my church has recognized me as kind of a sent missionary apologist, right? So not only are missionaries going out to other worlds, other countries, other cultures to evangelize, to share the gospel, and to call people to repentance, but there need to be missionaries, right, of this culture as well. And my church's view, and it still is mine today, even though things have changed, is to be connected to a local church. Right, to have a ministry as part of a local church where the church is supporting, a church is holding that person accountable, where there's accountability to the elders of the church in the way that Scripture kind of calls. And so that is how things function for a while. And so maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, but once the church started that kind of process, funding was able to go through the church to me to support this ministry. So just like any other missionary, fundraises to support the cost of the ministry, to support some living expenses, to keep the lights on, and to do everything that they are called to do, and to kind of help cover the cost of the time and expenses of the ministry. The same was true of me, and that people started to give through my church to support this work. Now, why things have changed is that, unfortunately, due to a wide range of circumstances, my church has actually closed doors. The church has shut down. And so once that process started to happen, it was kind of like, okay, so this avenue of giving for people is no longer going to be available. I can no longer be a sent missionary of a church if that church does not exist. So I started talking to the pastors and to others and trying to think through the best possible way to not only keep this ministry going, but really to keep those who have a heart for who want to be part of this work, right? And have a heart for this work to continue supporting and building up and hopefully growing this ministry to impact and reach more people. And so with all that said, what was come down to and what was decided is the best way to go about doing this would be to just create my own ministry. And so I started all the paperwork and I started working through everything. And in that process, Think Well was formed. Now, the name is kind of maybe undergone not changes necessarily, but the meaning has maybe kind of grown and expanded, right? As I've talked about again before on the show, is that I'm going to be starting my doctorate here in January, and it's a doctorate in engaging mind and culture, right? The idea is to help Christians and equip the church and equip believers to understand and think well when it comes to what they believe and think about Christianity, but as well as the worldviews and the ethical issues that are impacting and shaping the way that we approach the culture and is shaping the culture itself. And so trying to understand the worldviews that are affecting the way that we are living and the way that we believe and the way that we think and act, and then trying to understand all the ethical issues and apply a biblical worldview to those issues. So through apologetics and through biblical worldview, engaging the culture well, after we've kind of engaged our mind and thought well about who God is and what we are called to do as God's disciples. And so part of that doctorate is thinking well, and then engaging that mind to think well and think about all these things well so that we can accurately and more effectively engage the culture. And so since that is going to be my emphasis in my school and hopefully is kind of what I've been trying to do over the last few years, and also to, hey, Gma Joe, thanks for being here. You did catch it live. And trying has been my emphasis and will continue to be my emphasis as I grow in this ministry. I want to, again, train you to think well. So that was my idea as I proposed the name out there and like, hey, what do people think about the name Think Well? Training the church to think well. And I got two responses that were like, hey, I love the double meaning behind it. I was like, well, what's the double meaning? What are you talking about? And it was like, well, not only are you training people to think well, but it's also kind of like a think well, like a think tank, right? Where it's like, here's the place where we come to think, and to expose ourselves to different ways of thinking and to deeper thoughts and deeper processes. And I thought about that and I go, I like that idea, right? This think well, like a think tank. But then also, kind of in that same line, one of the things I do a lot on the show is exposing you to Christian thinkers, right? And so kind of the deep well of Christian thinkers who are out there, who have thought through these issues. I want you to know them and I want you to interact with their material and hopefully be encouraged by them so that you grow in your ability to think well and engage the culture with a biblical worldview. And so all those things kind of together, I love the name that I came up with. I came up with this, of course I should love it. But also, again, I think it really does reach or accurately reflect kind of the meaning. Now, I was talking to others who are like, I love it because it's not like overtly, Christian in one sense, if it's not like ministries or whatever. So it's like, if there ever becomes something in our culture where, there's a discrimination towards believers, I'm just helping people think well. And obviously this is a Christ-based religious organization, but the name itself doesn't necessarily give that away. It leaves a little bit of curiosity there of, well, think well, what does that mean? What exactly are you doing? And it kind of opens up those questions to say, hey, I'm a part of, or I support, or I run an organization called Think Well. And it's like, well, what is that? And so I think it leaves kind of a fun little curiosity there is exactly what it does, and kind of opens up that conversation for those that are curious. And so anyways, that is kind of what is related there. And so wanting to, again, help people think well. And so this is fun. This is exciting. And if you are curious, this is an official 501c3 recognized by the IRS organization. And so just like before with my church, all donations are tax deductible. If you want to give with a one-time gift, obviously at the beginning of this organization, there's a lot of new just fees and charges and things that come up as you have to pay certain people to do certain things to establish this and get it functioning rightly from the beginning. So there's a lot of upfront costs. If you want to give a one-time gift and kind of help support those upfront costs, I would greatly appreciate that. If you want to become a monthly supporter and continue to help out and what it's doing just to continue to cover all the expenses of the ministry, books that are buying, to do interviews and all that kind of stuff. Keep the lights on, right? I want to continue to provide free content. I want this to be free. I don't want to have to charge for anything. I want this to reach more people. And I don't like ads. I got rid of, if you didn't notice, I got rid of all the ads in the middle of my videos because YouTube was just putting too many there. And so it's like, hey, get rid of those. I want this to not be broken up and be distracted by all the ads. And so with that, if you want to help support on a monthly basis, you can do that. So if you're watching on YouTube, the link is below in the description. But if you want, the name of the website has also been changed. It's now thinkwell.org. It's with a dash, think-well.org. If you're listening on podcast, think-well.org is the new website, and you can go there for more information. And so that is one really fun, exciting kind of update and that I wanted to share with you. Now, also, other ministry updates as we jump in. Speaking, as I've told you at the beginning, has been busy. And so again, if you are still here, if you're still watching, if you're interested, look, I would love to have your support as far as not only financially, as we just talked about, and that's necessary, but also with prayer. Things have been going really well. So just a quick thing on some speaking events, then I'm going to tell you about upcoming interviews, and then we'll jump to any questions that you have. You can post those there as well. But I have already finished 2 of my 7 different events this summer. And so my wife and I and son were able to go up to a camp here in the Southern California area where there's about 85 or so junior high and high school students. We spent 3 days with them, gave 5 lectures, atheist role play, then how to kind of understand a biblical approach to the world and where people are at and understanding where people are at, and then trying to help them think critically about cultural issues. So there was a talk on gender identity and how do we navigate that as believers. And then there's also, giving a talk on entertainment culture. And so it was a really, really fun time to just be there with these students to help them, again, think well about the culture, help them approach these different challenging issues from a biblical worldview and truly understanding how to approach the world from God's perspective. They had a lot of really great questions, and it was just a blast to be with them. Now, after that trip, we immediately left, I did, for an LA immersive experience with Maven, right? So one of my jobs as well is I work with Maven, organization training Christians to know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty. And so there are 3 trips. I still have one coming up, but there are 3 different trips that we do with Maven, right? There's a biblical immersive experience, which I'm actually going on next week to Utah, where we train Christians in a Christian theology and Mormon theology, and then engage with Mormons and engage in and getting them out there to actually share the gospel and talk about who Jesus is and who God is and being able to articulate the differences there. We also have an apologetics trip where we train Christians on Christian apologetics and philosophy, and we take them out to have conversations with skeptics. And then the one I was on last week is the worldview trip. And so this trip really is focused on getting students to think about life, to see all things from their biblical worldview, to see how a biblical worldview affects every single area of life. So this was fun because it's very different. There's not the interactions like on the apologetic or biblical trip with unbelievers or non-believers or Mormons to have those sort of conversations and share the gospel. But this is mainly just giving them an experience that exposes them to different issues, as well as then giving a biblical perspective on that issue. So things like a biblical view of art. And then we took them to the Getty Art Museum and they looked at art from a biblical perspective. And how does this reflect a Christian worldview versus other worldviews? We did an experience where we went through West Hollywood. And then we talked about a biblical view of sexuality and identity. And we're able to walk through with the students of what does the Bible have to say about our identity and our sexuality? How does that compare to a culture's view in how people are approaching these issues? We gave them a Christian view of economics and work. What does it look like to be an employee from a biblical worldview? How are we supposed to handle money from a biblical worldview? We had a presentation on New Age views and kind of the issues with New Ageism and new spirituality, the questions that they can and can't answer, and then how do we approach different issues that are kind of related to the New Age movement from a biblical worldview as well. We went to the Museum of Tolerance here in Los Angeles, which is the Holocaust Museum, and looked at this idea of sin and corruption and brokenness and justice and what do we do about injustice, and trying to again address that from a biblical worldview. We did two different things on poverty, where we talked about a biblical view of poverty. We went down to Venice Beach, where there's a lot of homeless, and did some help with the homeless there in a way that helps them and not hurts them. We went over to the Orange County Rescue Mission, which is one of the most comprehensive homeless ministries in the country, where they were able to serve alongside people who have gotten off the streets and are part of their program to get back up on their feet, receiving a hand up, not just a hand out. There was a presentation by one guy who's been in the program about a year. And again, just trying to help them see, how are we supposed to deal with those who are poor? How are we supposed to deal with the homeless who are living around us from a biblical worldview? And so there's a lot of other issues that we talked about, but those are the two trips that I've been on so far. Just again, trying to help Christians think biblically about all of life, to where they don't have this separation, right? Where it's like the Christian life is over here and then the rest of the world is over here, right? Here's where I worship God, then here's where I make my money, and here's where I have my fun. It's like, no, God has something to say about that. God has something to say about everything. How do we have that biblical approach? So those were two events. If you've been praying for me, I appreciate it. I've been trying to post a few little updates on the YouTube community page, as well as there's other social media that is there as well that you can stay connected with what's happening. Now, coming up, here's one that you can be a part of if you are listening and you catch this before it goes out. This weekend in Torrance, California. Now, if you're in the LA area, this is open. But if you're not, this will be live streamed. And again, I'm going to post this on social media. I'm going to post this on my YouTube page if you're interested. But I am speaking at the Torrance, the Bread of Life Church summer conference series that is this weekend. So every summer they have a conference, they bring in a speaker, and I was blessed and lucky enough to be chosen to be this summer's summer conference speaker. So Friday night, one talk Friday night, 2 Saturday morning, and 2 Sunday morning. There are going to be 5 sessions total that I'm going to be giving. They are live streaming all 5 sessions on their YouTube channel. I believe that those links are kind of restricted, at least. You have to have the link. And so I forgot to post it before, but afterwards in the description on YouTube, I will post their website where they give you the link to every single one, as well as on social media and on YouTube. I will be posting the link for each one before it goes live. But again, those sessions, I think if I remember off the top of my head, Friday night is going to be a talk that I do called Everyone Has to Start Somewhere. I don't think I actually have that recorded in full on YouTube. And so really this is a talk to try to see, again, take a different approach to life, understanding who God is and how he relates to us. And as well as I think it applies to both evangelism, as well as how to have conversations with people and understand where they're at. And so this is going to be kind of a basic apologetic. It gives a little bit of apologetic for God's existence. And as well as God is someone that you should want to get to know. Saturday morning is going to be how relativism undermines the faith in Christ, how we need to understand these relativistic ideas in our culture, as well as what else is Saturday? I don't remember. Maybe why does God allow evil? I think that might be Saturday as well. That might be Sunday morning. So then there's why does God allow evil is another one. And then Sunday, I think, is why God allows evil. And then I'm finishing Sunday with a talk on redeeming entertainment culture. So there's one more talk in there I can't remember off the top of my head. But that is this coming weekend, Friday night, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. So again, those are live streamed if you want to watch it. Or if you're in the area, I would love to see you in person. Come out and say hi. Now, the day I finish speaking in Torrance. My wife and I and my son are flying out to Utah for the Biblical Immersive Experience with Maven that I just told you about. There's a team of about 34 high school students from Tampa, Florida that are going to be flying out to Utah. We're going to be doing a week of ministry there in Utah. So again, a lot of updates will go out on Instagram. If you want to follow there, Ryan Pauly 3, you can kind of keep up to date with what's happening each day. After coming back from that trip, there's another trip up to another summer camp here in Southern California where there's a combined junior high school camp, and I helped develop the curriculum for this camp. So there's going to be 8 sessions walking through evidence for God and how science and faith relate to each other. There's also going to be the talk on gender identity, I think why God allows evil, redeeming entertainment culture, right? So this is just a wide range of talks to help the students understand, again, a biblical approach to life, how Christianity answers the difficult questions in life, how we respond to the difficult challenges, the science and faith issues, why God allows evil issues, as well as then apply to cultural issues like gender identity and I don't remember, entertainment and all that kind of stuff. And so that is coming up in July. After that, we fly out to Tampa, Florida, giving a similar range of talks at a church retreat there, a high school retreat in Tampa. And then in August, again, I've talked about this a little bit. I'll talk about it more. Summit, Colorado, right? Summit Ministries, if you don't know, Summit is an incredible ministry. Every summer, they have 7 2-week-long sessions training high school and like college age students, 16 to 22 year olds on a biblical worldview. And it is about 70 hours of lectures. I think there's like 40 lectures, about 70 hours over the course of 12 days, where there's about 15 different speakers and faculty members come in to train students over the 12 days on a biblical approach to pretty much everything, giving them that biblical worldview. If you don't know Summit, it's amazing. But I was blessed and so excited to be invited as what's called a faculty in residence. So again, my wife and son and I are flying out to Summit, where we will be living at the Summit Hotel, session 7. I think all the girl slots are full, but if you're a guy or you have a son who's listening, I think that there still are some boy slots available. But session 7, Summit, Colorado, we'll be living there for 2 weeks. And so I'll be giving 4 talks throughout my time there, but mainly our role is just to hang out with the students, to answer questions during free time, to have meals with them, to kind of just be a family that kind of just models what this all kind of looks like. So there's a big pressure to that. But then other faculty members will be coming in, giving lectures, and I kind of am there to answer questions based on those lectures if they can't talk to that faculty member. And so that is what is, again, coming up that I would love your prayers for. Question came in, Gma Joe, thanks for asking. It says, can I donate through YouTube and website or only website? So YouTube has, I still have it turned on. YouTube has ability to donate. There's like the thanks button at the bottom, or there are like super stickers. YouTube takes like 30% of that, I think. And so if you donate through YouTube, that is available, but about 70% comes to me. If you go through my website, there are 2 different ways of donating. So thanks for asking this, Gma Joe. 2 different ways of donating. You can either donate online through Giving Fuel is the platform that I've chosen and that I'll be receiving donations from. Again, just like with any online platform, they are going to take a small percentage, but it's way, way, way smaller than YouTube. And so a lot more will go to the ministry if you give through my website. There's also the ability to give by mail. So you can send a check by mail. The address, I can pull that up if you're interested. It is on my website, but I can pull that up here really quick for you. And obviously, if you send a check through mail, then 100% will go into the ministry rather than, because you're not dealing with any sort of other company to allow those donations to go through. So the address, you would make the checks payable to Think Well and then mail it to Think Well. And that is P.O. Box 853, Placentia, California, 92871. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, at the very bottom of the description, there is a link that will send you to the donate page that will give you those options. So again, I guess you can donate all 3 ways. You can donate through the mail, send a check or a money order or whatever. You can, through banks, you can do like a bill pay where it just sends a check every month if you want to set up a monthly thing. And 100% will come into the ministry. And there's an address for that. If you want to give through online, give through my website online, Giving Fuel, a very small percentage is taken for processing fees, but the rest goes into the ministry. You also can give to YouTube and they just take a much larger percentage. So thanks for that question, Jima Joe, and hope that helps. One other thing is, before I jump in, because, this is relevant to the interviews that are coming up. So you said, Jima Joe, I saw Lisa Childers on your webpage. Love her. She is going to be a guest on your show in August. So you're looking forward to having her. That's awesome that you're going to have her. So here's one of the interviews. So one of the first interviews coming up, Lisa Childers, right, is well known for speaking out against progressive Christianity. She wrote the book, Another Gospel, where she argues that progressive Christianity is another gospel and kind of these ideas that Christians need to be aware of. Now, recently, there was a book written critiquing Lisa Childers called Progressive Christians Love Jesus Too by Randall Rouser. And I was watching his Twitter account, and I was seeing a lot of the stuff he was posting and the ways that he was trying to interact with this. And I thought, look, there's a lot of people right now creating content on progressive Christianity. And I think for very good reason is we as Christians have to think well about progressive Christianity, what it is and how to approach it. And there's a lot of people saying, hey, here's conversation I had. Let me tell you about it. And then there's critiques that happen over here. And there are some times where people get together for a conversation to think about it. And I think that should happen. Maybe I could say more than it is happening is the conversation about it. And so I had Lisa Childers on the show a while back when her book, Another Gospel, came out. And I do side with Elisa. I've read her book, and I agree that I think in progressive Christianity, depending on how it's defined, is another gospel. It changes enough of the core Christian faith to where it is something different. Randall Rouser would disagree. He is going to say, no, progressive Christians love Jesus too. There's not enough of a corruption here. They are Christian. There's no reason to call them not Christian. I've invited Randall to come on the show, right? And so July 6th. June 6th has already passed. July 6th, Randall Rouser is going to be joining the show. I don't remember exactly what time of the day. Most of the interviews are going to be happening in the morning. Let me pull this up here really quick. I forgot to write it down. June 6th, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Randall is going to be coming on the show to discuss his book, Progressive Christians Love Jesus Too. And so this is going to be a conversation with someone who I'm going to disagree with. And I told him this. When I wrote him the email, I said, look, I'm going to side with Elisa on this topic. I do think progressive Christianity, as far as it's defined in a certain way, right, is another gospel. But I do also think that Randall brings up a lot of really good questions that need to be thought through. And so rather than just kind of talking about progressives and how to kind of think about it, I want to invite someone on that in one sense considers himself a progressive Christian to kind of explain it for himself. And so you can hear from him where he thinks, it is too far, where he thinks Christians are misrepresenting progressive Christians. And so you can kind of hear that side from someone who holds to that side. And so I have some pushback, obviously, and we're going to talk through that. But that is going to be the first live stream after I come back from my Utah Biblical Immersive Experience on July 6th. After that, Daryl Bach. If you are unfamiliar with that name, if you're a pastor or preach at your church, you probably are familiar with Bach, especially if you preach through the book of Luke or the book of Acts. Daryl Bach is a well-known New Testament scholar that has written probably the go-to commentary on Luke and Acts. And so if you've ever studied those books, gone in depth and pulled commentaries on Luke or Acts, you've probably read or looked at the Bach commentary. Not only is he a world-renowned New Testament scholar, Daryl Bach is also the director of cultural engagement at Dallas Theological Seminary. And he wrote this book, which I'll show you here on YouTube, Cultural Intelligence, Living for God in a Diverse, Pluralistic World. And so he takes examples from Paul and trying to create a theology of cultural engagement, right? So obviously with me going back to school for my doctorate in engaging mind and culture, this is my passion. I want to try to help train you to think well of how to engage culture. Well, then that would be inviting someone like Daryl Bach in, the director of cultural engagement from Dallas Theological Seminary, written the book Cultural Intelligence, to hear from him how we can be better about our cultural engagement. So that is July 12 at 1 p.m. Pacific time. 2 days later, right? I'm trying to combine some interviews in for you in the time that I'm home and trying to cram pack some content so that while I'm gone, you have some stuff to watch. But 2 days later, on July 14 at 10 a.m. Pacific time, Alex Mcfarland is coming on the show. He wrote a book quite a while ago. It's not a recent book, but a while ago, titled The 21 of the Toughest Questions Your Kids Will Ask About Christianity. So he's going to come on the show, and I'm going to pick 5 or 10 of those 21. And we're just going to talk through some of the toughest questions that students ask about Christianity. So if you're a parent and you want to try to figure out how can I be prepared to answer the questions that my kids are asking? If you're a teacher and you say, how can I be prepared to answer the questions my students are asking? Or maybe you are the student and you have these questions. I hope this show is going to be encouragement for you, is good for you to help you think through the questions that you have. And so July 14, Alex Mcfarland coming on to discuss some of the toughest questions kids ask about Christianity. And then lastly, I head off to my the camp trip here in Southern California, and I come back from that. And on July 25th, Mikel Del Rosario is coming on to talk about questions about Jesus. And so Mikel, he just received his doctorate and wrote his dissertation on the divine claims of Jesus in the New Testament. He was at Dallas Theological Seminary. He co-hosted the Table podcast with Darrell Bach at Dallas Theological Seminary and has recently received a position being a professor at Moody Bible Institute. And his doctorate is in Jesus and the divine claims of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus. And so I've asked him to come on and say, hey, how about some of the toughest questions about Jesus? And so with Alex Mcfarland, we're going to stay away from questions about Jesus because in a few weeks, Mikel Del Rosario is going to be coming on to discuss some of the toughest questions about Jesus. So all that said, if you have questions about Jesus, please send them in. You can either comment on this video. You can email me right now. It's still contact@coffeehousequestions.com. You can, that'll be changing hopefully soon. You can contact through social media at Ryan Pauly 3 as most of my social media accounts are on Facebook. I think that's Ryan Pauly 2 on Facebook. And so you can start sending those questions that you have for those interviews. So those are going to be 4 fun, exciting, interesting interviews coming up here the rest of this summer. Now, the last thing I want to kind of reach out to, thank you, Gima Joe, for saying that you'll donate. That is so encouraging. I appreciate that. It's just, again, I don't know how to say this, but just, I love doing this, right? And I do it just because I love it. And I love getting this time to share what I've learned. I also to receive critique on the things that I say, to make sure I formulate my thoughts well. And so when other people want to give back and want to partner in that, it is such a blessing and encouragement. So thank you so much for that. One other thought I had, and I'm just going to pitch this out there and see what you guys think. And this is kind of the last, I think, of the announcements. I didn't think it would go 30 minutes, but hey, it went 30 minutes. So this is the last of the announcements. If you have questions, send them in. I just picked up this book. Now, this is an older book, Richard Dawkins, a few years. I forget exactly when this was published. Let's see here. The publishing date on it is 2019. So just a few years old, right? Dawkins, famous for like the God Delusion, other books. He wrote this. It's more of like written almost like kids, right? It's a beginner's guide. Titled Outgrowing God by Richard Dawkins. And I've always looked at this book and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to pick that book up and kind of work through the arguments that he gives. And it wasn't until I got a library card yesterday and saw this in the religion section that it's broken up into 2 very nice sections. Part 1, Goodbye God. Part 2, Evolution and Beyond, right? So surely there must be an intelligent designer's 1 chapter. And kind of, did we evolve to be religious? Did we evolve to be nice? Part 1 is arguments that supposedly are going to destroy God, is that there are so many gods, but how is it true? The myths and how they start. And then he talks about the Bible. Do we need to be God in order to be good? Or do we need God in order to be good? And then how do we decide what is good? And so those are kind of the chapters and the breakdown of this book. And so my thought was, I just got this from the library. I wanted to kind of read through this and then do maybe a mini series working through the arguments that Richard Dawkins gives in this newer book of his. Again, like written to young people, like the chapters are super short. And so it's like, man, if we're not careful, like this may be convincing to some. And as I've looked over briefly, these are not the best arguments. So anyways, if that sounds interesting, that is something I'm thinking of doing as well, coming up here in the future, to work through his book, the arguments he gives that supposedly are good by God, and evaluating those and kind of sharing my thoughts on them. So, all right. I think I've covered pretty much everything. I talked about what the summer has been. I've talked about the new launching of this ministry. I've talked about all the events coming up that I would love your prayer for, as we head out on the road, my family and I, to train and equip and be with students. There are 4 interviews that you can be looking forward to in the next few weeks. I would agree. Yeah, Dawkins and his philosophy and his doing polemics and is not the best. And again, even the first argument, right, in the book, right? There are so many gods, right? This is, I think, just such a simple thing, right? There are so many gods. How do you know yours is the right one? That's how some people put it. Or there are so many gods and you're an atheist when it comes to all the rest. So I just go one step further, one God further. It's like saying there are so many men in the world. How do you know Bob is the murderer? It could have been one of the other 3 billion men. It's like, well, we point to Bob as the murderer because there's evidence that points to Bob, right? And so, and it's like, well, I just go one God further. Well, the difference of an atheist and a theist is not how many gods you reject. It's a theist is someone who believes that there's a God. An atheist is one that says there is no God. And so these are simple arguments that seem to be convincing to some as you look on social media and places, and they're often presented as this, well, but there are so many gods. How do you know yours is the right one? And it's because they kind of keep showing back up, even though they have been responded to many, many, many times. And so, hey, there's probably a million responses out there to these arguments, but hey, why not 1,000,001? Why not one more if that's something that could be of value to you? So with that, okay, all the events that happened, all the events coming up, 4 different interviews for you to look forward to in the future, as well as always, let me just throw this out as well. On my website, there's also a page where you can suggest someone, right? So I'm always trying to find new books, new authors, new Christian thinkers to have conversations with, and I take recommendations, I take suggestions. And so if you have a suggestion on someone who has written a book that you want to talk through, I would love to kind of hear that thought and be able to consider that person. Again, what I've been trying to do, what's interesting is I have received criticism of well, I only interview Christians or people I agree with. And that's not necessarily true. Not everyone I interview do I agree with everything that they say. I think they have interesting points to think through. But I also want to interview people that disagree. And so I've reached out. There's been multiple atheists that have commented on stuff, kind of criticizing and critiquing. And I've reached out to them and said, hey, I'm willing to have you on my show. Let's have a conversation about this. And they always agree. And then nothing ever gets set up. And so I'm trying to find other people as well to kind of introduce you. I don't want this to turn into a debate show, but I think it is of value to have you hear things from another perspective, from the own perspective, not just someone talking about atheists, but have the atheists talk for themselves, have the progressive Christian talk for themselves, and to be able to evaluate it well. So that's always my hope. So the person doesn't have to necessarily agree, although that always is easier. Less kind of vetting, so to speak, needs to happen if that is the way that it is. Question. Okay. May I ask what time zone I'm in to watch the interview on July 6th? Yes, I'm in California, so Pacific time. Yeah, so we are Pacific time on the 6th. It's going to be 11 a.m. is what it is in my my phone. I'm hopefully before I leave for the Torrance conference this weekend, hopefully I will have all the thumbnails for those 4 interviews created and up on YouTube. And so it should, if you click on the thumbnail of the upcoming interviews or upcoming live streams, it'll give you the time when it's being streamed in your area. It kind of adjusts for those time zones things. So, but yep, I'm in Pacific time. So with that, I don't see any other questions in the live chat. So Slam and Jima Joe, thank you so much for being here. Everyone else who is watching after the fact or listening on radio or podcast, thank you so much for being here. Again, it has been such an honor and a blessing. 7 years or so since I started kind of this ministry. It's undergone a lot of changes. It's undergone some new things and adapting to different things and going from blogging to podcasting to now to YouTube and podcast. But it has been fun. And I just hope that this is the beginning of so much more as I continue to grow in my knowledge and my understanding, and then being able to share that with you and help continue to equip you, the church, or even if you're not a Christian, to continue thinking through these things and to, again, apply a biblical worldview to everything, to think well and live well. So again, what time again on the interview? 11 a.m. 11 a.m. on July 6th with Randall Rouser discussing progressive Christianity. So with that, thank you all again for being here, for your support. I don't know if this is a show that you would share with people around you, but if you want to hit like and share and subscribe, that would be an encouragement as well as we continue to head off and to do more things and to continue making a difference. Isn't it amazing that we get to participate in the kingdom work that God has called us to, that we get to use our talents and our giftings and things he's given us to build up his kingdom? I love it. I'm amazed by it. I'm encouraged by it. And I hope you are too. So with that, have a wonderful, blessed rest of your day. Continue to think well and think deeply about God, Christianity, Jesus, because they are worth thinking about. See you, everybody. Have a blessed rest of your day.